Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to continue my Trails of Cold Steel 3 discussion. If you haven't seen the previous parts to this discussion, I'll include a link to them in the description down below. But with this, I'm going to start off with, we talked about old Class 7 last time. This time, I'm going to be talking about new Class 7. And once again, just like the dynamic and just like, obviously, like Ring. Because obviously, he's kind of been somewhat in that leadership role. He's kind of been that core for old Class 7. And he's kind of a little bit that he's that guide. Obviously he's trying to be a little bit more like Sarah, because obviously he takes a lot of implements, not just with Class 7, the new Class 7, but even all the branch campus students as well. He takes a lot of his experiences with, from his school days as well as his classmates and how they like approach a lot of their situations. But we'll get to that, soon enough. But let's start off with Juna. And I think Juna presents a very interesting aspect with her character, because obviously, like, it's also this interesting thing because she's from outside of the country, so a lot of the stuff that goes down in Erebonia, she doesn't know like what's going on. So like, obviously, there's some stuff that she's like, I'm confused about. To be fair, there's a lot of stuff that like obviously we as like the player as well as like old Class 7 knows a lot of this because they know the ins and outs of a lot of this. So like, obviously, some of new Class 7's in the dark. I think Altina's the only person, and Musse as well, who is the most filled in about everything, because obviously stuff will come up about Ring that he'll kind of reference some stuff that everyone else is like, what's that about? But like when stuff about the Chancellor comes up, Altina will look because she knows what Ring's situation was. She was there when the reveal was like, oh, that's his dad, but no one else is. It makes you wonder, does Musse know? Because I would assume Musse wouldn't know, considering the fact is that neither Alfin nor Elise knows, because he hasn't talked to either one of them about it. Because the only people that know are people there. But maybe Musse's pretty damn smart. She's got good perception. She's able to kind of see so far ahead, so she's probably been able to piece it together. Like there's other characters that, like, even Toa herself says it later on, like, yeah, she was able to kind of piece it together about kind of what went down in the Infernal Castle reveals and all that. Regardless, going back to Juna, I think it's such an interesting thing because obviously she is from Crossbell, and obviously like what that means for Ring too, because Ring doesn't talk about it too much, but I think when it comes to the whole Crossbell situation, I feel like he feels personally involved because obviously he played his own part. But the whole thing was like and I think Toval ends up bringing it up to him later on, as it kind of gets brought up in conversation. You had nothing to do with the annexation. You literally came in after the annexation. I think Randy ends up talking to him about that. It's like, you had no part to play in all this, but he doesn't talk about it. But I think Ring also feels responsible because it's like the one pushing the annexation was my dad. So as his son, I think he feels an even more personal responsibility for that. Because even later on, Lecter was like, what are you feeling so bad about? You had nothing to do with, you didn't kill anyone from Calvert. Because they were even, because even Tio was saying like, yeah, like we heard about the fact is that you always destroyed the ships, but always made sure that you never killed anyone in the process. But Rena's like, no matter what, I was still responsible because I worked with the government doing that. I didn't go against them. And obviously Prince Oliver feels the same way. He feels as a prince of this country, he feels just as responsible for the actions that the country takes. But like the reason why I'm bringing that all up is because Dad, I think that's why Ring because he even says like coming back to Crossbell isn't just a thing for Juna, it's also a thing for him too, because it's like he has a lot of stuff, like obviously the Northern War and this, like it still weighs on him, his part that he played in all of this, He made this choice and he kind of has to live with it. He did what he thought, because everyone tries to make him feel better like at the end of 2, but also during this, it's like the choices you made saved countless lives. If you hadn't been where you are, like who knows how things could have really, turned around. But obviously the struggles of like Juna kind of not liking Ring, but I think it's also because she does find him a little inspiring. Like it's so interesting because like Kurt talks mad shit about the 8 leaves. I talked about that before. She's like, whoa, isn't that a little harsh? And then Altina's like, really? You out of anyone shouldn't be saying that, because she was very harsh to him the entire time. I also love the fact is her and Kurt had that very Elise and Ring situation. Once again, it just kind of coming full circle. And obviously he handled that situation a lot better than Ring and Elisa did. Obviously he's like, if you want to, you can go ahead and slap me. And it's like that issue got dealt with a lot sooner. I mean, it still was a time period before like Kurt and Juna ended up officially making up. But obviously, it took a while with Ring and Elisa, because I even think Altina kind of references the fact it's like, oh, doesn't this kind of remind you of something? He's just like, we're going to ignore that. Don't even bring that up. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But I thought was kind of powerful, the fact is like obviously the second place you go for your field exercises is Crossbell, and obviously Juna trying to keep up this, air of like, no, I'm okay, but obviously she was like barely hanging on, because it's just like when you're looking at your home and just how much it's changed, and just because it's like Crossbell had its own issues, because that's obviously everything that kind of came up in the Crossbell games. Once again, I've never played them, but obviously because of this game, you get a little insight in just to the Azure Tree situation, the Mirror situation, the cult, all that stuff. Like, you get a little more insight into it, because I think that's also why she doesn't look at Rain as a hero, because she's like, I know real heroes, like people who fight for justice, you know, the SSS, you know, that Randy, T.O., and Lloyd were part of. So she looks at them as heroes, so that's why she has a little animosity towards Rain. But we also find out later on, it's also because it's like she has this complicated feeling, because it's like, should I be looking up to him? But at the same time, he did save me and my siblings' life. She knew it the entire time. She had the very complicated feelings that I think it's just, you know, Juna can be, you know, she could be a little ditzy, but she could also be very caring, because obviously we see that with her relationship with Ali, because she was the first one to kind of really, you know, Ali kind of really, you know, opened up with her, and obviously like her relationship with Jessica and Luis, and the whole them being part of the tennis club thing and everything. I thought, you know, that's a pretty dope element, because obviously you can definitely see the parallels between Juna and Elisa anyway, you know. So even because even I think even Ring commented on it, it's like, oh yeah, it kind of reminds him of, like, you know, Elisa being part of the lacrosse club. Obviously, she doesn't have her Ferris, because Jessica and Luis are pretty much, you know, they're actually kind of more like the Theresa and Emily kind of, but, you know, and even they don't have the same dynamic that Emily and Theresa had, but regardless. But obviously, you know, that hard-hitting moment, like when you're on top of, you know, was it Orich Tower, where the whole situation gets revealed, like, oh, the SSS isn't going to show up because they've actually been trapped on the island. Like, the government set this whole situation up so that they can't come in and step in and be the heroes. And obviously, it's just like, you know, why are you taking our pride away from us? Like, you know, and just obviously, you know, how much it, you know, it's affecting everyone, because everyone feels bad, because even Oliver's there and kind of being like, you know, he feels ashamed. Everyone feels ashamed because they see like her struggle and what, you know, because obviously the crossbow she knew was taken from her, and it's become this whole thing, you know. But, you know, hearing Ring talk, and obviously having Kurt and Ali be there for her, because Jessica and Luis were, you know, trying to be there for her, while also giving her space. Because of all of them and that encouragement, she was able to kind of stand up. It's like, what are you going to fight for? Are you really just going to let this pass you by? Like, you have to decide what you want to do, what you're going to do. And, you know, she's like, I don't need him to say that. So, you know, she made the choice to, you know, stand up and fight, because it's like, you're not in this alone. Because obviously Kurt's like, you were there for me when I was in my low point, so I'm here for you. And so is Ali. The entire campus is here for you, because everyone was feeling bad about, because everyone was there and they heard what went down. So they're like, everyone in the branch campus was supporting her and had her back. So it gave her the strength to, you know, stand up and fight. So that was the instance of, like, obviously you go up against that Ion. This time it's Juna and Reen fighting the Ion, you know. So I just thought that was kind of a pretty dope element. And it was actually kind of interesting, because we, you know, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, I think, if that was in these recordings, I don't remember if I had cut them out. Well, in a previous part, was the whole situation about, like, everyone having their particular reasons for coming to the branch campus, and we found out what Yuna's was. Her situation was that, I just watched it, but I can't remember. At the party, she ends up talking about the fact is the reason why she's also super tight with Claire, not only was Claire an instructor at the police academy, but was also because when there was an Erebonian person there, because obviously she was very, like, anti this whole Erebonia situation. She was kind of not liking the whole takeover thing, and she was outspoken about it. And because she was kind of protesting and all, like, an Erebonian person who was teaching there kind of took all her credits away from her. Claire was able to kind of get her half of her credits back, but if she wanted to get the other, she would have to kind of, you know, transfer to a different school. But obviously for her, she chose to go to Erebonia, like, decided to go to the branch campus in the grand scheme of things, just because she didn't want to stay there, because that would have just been like going to a different school. It would have still been kind of the same issues. And she even says, like, it wouldn't have been good for her growth, because she would have just stayed there. She would have just, you know, she would have just still been there so begrudgingly. So that's why she left. Because this way it kind of gave her a little bit of a fresh start, but also it's like, because of that, she's experienced so much, and she's grown so much because of the experience, because she's learned so much about Erebonia, and even her perspective is switched, because she used to be more like all about crossbow, who cares about arrow? Because even throughout the game, like, they try to tell her, like, oh yeah, this aspect about crossbow is pretty dope. Like, even Rin tries to play into that just to make her feel better about, because obviously it's, you know, she's almost like comparing, like, oh, this place isn't as great as crossbow, you know, but obviously, like, that being a thing. But later on, her position is shifted because she wants to actually bridge the gap. She thinks, like, you know, when the time comes, she wants to be there to help, you know, bring Erebonians and Crossbellians together. Like, that there's so much in common, you know, so it's like, we don't need the beef that we have. Like, she wants to bring them all together, to, like, bring that unity together. And I think she in particular is going to be that bridge, you know. So I think that's kind of a dope aspect about her character, and I expect that to be kind of where her story ends up going in the future. Maybe, maybe not, you know? Next up, we'll talk about Kurt. I thought that was an interesting development, because obviously he's like another swordsman, because obviously it's kind of, I think, a little bit of a parallel between, because obviously he's kind of like Yuce's and Laura's character, because he's very reminiscent of, like, how, like, obviously, you know, Laura and Rin always had that relationship about being swordsmen together. That, you know, their skill with swords and everything, that being a conversation, and that obviously being a bond between Rin and Kurt. But it's also the interesting development of, like, oh, he's a Vander, which obviously Rin's met his uncle Zex as well as his half-brother Yula, because even Rin was like, yeah, he does look a little different from the, it's like, because we end up finding out they have different moms. Which is actually very interesting, because obviously that's very reflective of Oliver and Alphen and Cedric, just because, like, they, you know, obviously Alphen and Cedric obviously are twins, so they have the same mom, but obviously they have a different mom from Oliver. So it's kind of an interesting parallel, considering the Vanders are meant to, like, protect the guard the imperial family. So it's just interesting, like, that parallel that they kind of still have in that same regard. But I think it's kind of interesting, like, obviously Kurt kind of has his own reservations about his own skills and stuff like that, because he feels like he doesn't match up, because he uses the twin blade style of the Vanders. It's like, it's not very popular. It's not something a lot of people use. It's usually like the double-handed sword, like, it's like their single sword style, but he doesn't have the muscle or body type for it, so it's very befitting him. But obviously, you know, like, he's, you know, he struggles to prove himself on many different levels, because he feels like he doesn't stack up to his dad, his uncle, or his brother, especially because the whole complicated thing, as we learn about as the game progresses, about the Vanders. The Vanders were excused from being the Imperial family's guards, and they've been that guard for, I guess, generations, you know. So for that to be taken away from them, kind of a staple of the Vander family, and Kurt kind of felt like he was kind of lost without that. He felt like his family was kind of thrown to the wayside, and he kind of lost their pride, what they lived for. And I think that's a big part of Kurt's journey, because obviously he hears from his brother, because you learn about this at bonding events, where they kind of, I think his brother had wrote him telling him, like, you need to kind of find your own way, like, you know, basically find out what the Vander name means for you. Don't let our history dictate who you are. You got to find your own path, because that's the whole conversation. Because the pathway for a swordsman, the pathways are similar, but they're always different. Everyone has a different path down their path to swordsmanship. So Rin kind of, you know, let to know that, because that's something, obviously, like, you know, he's learned from personal experience too, because obviously he had 2 other swordsmen. I mean, technically even 3, because, like, Fee has her gun blades, and even more so because, like, Sarah also has her gun and her sword as well. But it's like, he learned that, you know, specifically from Laura, like, the way to mastery, the way down the path to sword is different for everyone, you know. And that's something Kurt has to kind of learn. We learn, like, obviously, like, he left the main campus because being around the prince would have just meant, like, a reminder, like, oh, like, I've lost my duty. Like, it was kind of a last-minute decision to go to the branch campus, but once again, it ended up helping him out, benefiting him, because he ended up being in Rin's class, and how much he was able to grow because of that, you know. And so I thought that was kind of a dope aspect to his character, because, like, there's even parallels between him and Rin, because once again, Rin wasn't that very, like, didn't believe too much in his own swordsman skills. And even he, like I said, that kind of shows you also, like, Rin isn't as down on his swordsmanship skills as he was in the previous games, I feel like. But, you know, but obviously you can, like, I'm sure when Rin looks at Kurt, he sees a little bit of himself too, like, oh yeah. Because even Kurt's like, he's like, Kurt's above where, because remember, Reem was like a beginner like level wise, he was a beginner in the 8 leaves when he was basically Kurt's age, and Kurt's at the intermediate level. It took Reem getting there like in between 1 and 2, but even then he felt like until he got the spirit unification, that scene with Alphen, that's what made him go like, you gave me the scroll too soon, master. And now at that moment he truly, you know, inherited the intermediate style, you know, level, I would rather say. But I just thought that was kind of a dope aspect about Kurt's side of, you know, things as well. Then you have Altina's situation, which I love that reveal when it's like Reen's walking down, he sees the entire Bridge campus and he sees Altina, and Altina kind of looks away from him, and it's like, cause we don't know the ins and outs, because the last time we saw Altina and Reen together was at during the cross development, which I thought that was so interesting, because I felt like out of anyone, why didn't they pair Reen and Milliam together, because there was already that relationship. But it's also like, I like that development, because obviously they've been on missions together since then, because obviously one of those said things was the Northern War. I didn't talk about it, but I actually think it's interesting because they actually refer to the Civil War in 2, they actually refer to it as the October War. It makes sense because it started literally at the end of October, obviously going until literally the end of the year. But regardless, it's just, I like Altina's growth, because obviously like the relationship she has with Milliam, because she kind of finds Milliam a little bit annoying. It's like, you're not, you run your mouth off a little too much about missions. You don't take anything seriously, but at the same time there is a little bit of jealousy, because she's just like, like the relationship Reen has with Milliam and the way Milliam just is with everyone, because Altina's very reserved in her emotions, but Milliam is very like, she's like got this big, larger than life personality, which obviously you can tell why that would probably annoy Altina. But, you know, I like that over the course of her bonding events, obviously you get to experience the bonding event where she actually joins the swimming club, obviously getting close, like probably like next to Juna, the person she got closest to was Lenora, and how Lenora always kind of kept pushing her. And obviously like even that beautiful thing of like, you know, at the end, like her like final bonding event, like the one end game, not the one that gives you the trophy, but the one that where it's like she's, you know, taking taking a photo with everyone from Class 7, including this swimming club, and then you see like Reen almost sees like a moment of like, he's like, and she's like, what's wrong? Because she's smiling, because she doesn't really smile that much, but as the game progresses you see it more and more as she, you know, she makes jokes with Juna about like, oh yeah, like you're not actually really good in class, Juna, like I'm the one that kind of has to help you a lot, and Yuna's like, you don't have to bring that up. But also just like what she's able to grow, because obviously she wants to stay by Reen's side. It's like, all right, the rest of the class gets left behind, but obviously we've been partners for a while, so but he's like, no, I want you to stay here. She's like, but, and for her it's like, this is a mission, but it's not just a mission. Like at first she thinks it's just that, but eventually it's like, no, I care about Reen, I care about Juna, I care about Kurt, I care about Musse and Ash. I actually care about this group. I care about Milliam. Like she slowly starts to realize how she feels about things and how much she was able to kind of grow. Because I think, unlike Milliam accepts her situation as being a homunculi, like she just kind of accepts it, and it's just, I feel like their approaches to accepting it is different, because obviously Milliam has still her bubbly personality, but obviously for Altina it's just kind of, my situation's my situation, but I accept it, I'm not human. But obviously she lets it slip, obviously sometimes, because she made that whole bit in Crossbell when it's like the reveal about like how Reen kind of snuck into her room, and you're like, oh my god, and also him running away with the princess and everything, and he's like, whoa, you're giving them the wrong impression, but she kind of clears things up a little bit, like she does that a little bit, and kind of goes down the misleading route, it's being a bit and everything, but it's actually interesting because her story kind of reminds me a bit, especially being a part of the swimming club, she kind of reminds me a little bit of Monica's story, because obviously Monica wanted to learn how to swim, like, because obviously it's like 50 arch or whatever, it's like the length of the pool or whatever, and obviously for Altina she's eventually able to do like 40 without even realizing it at the time. So it's just like, it's just an interesting element of just like what characters are kind of like built into these main character stories, like who they kind of are reminiscent of in certain regards. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope. The parallels between Lenora and Altina's relationship as like, you know, Laura and Monica's relationship, you know, so you can see the parallels in that. But I also think it's, you know, the sad situation playing out the way it does at the end where, you know, Altina gets taken And the fact of the matter is, like, she was meant to be the OZ. She was meant to be the weapon that ends up killing the Holy Beast. But Milliam took her place because it's like, no, it's going to be me. It's like, we both have the same specs. I'm your big sister, so it's my time to shine, and I'm going to protect everyone, all of Class 7, as well as you, Tilly, you know? And it's just like, sadly, Altina's kind of knocked out the entire time, so she probably doesn't know about what happened to Milliam until like when she wakes up. But it's just like that heartbreaking scene, because that could have been Altina, but she was like, no, this is me. But you know, Milliam sacrifices herself for everyone, you know. And just once again, it's still so damn heartbreaking. But once again, like, I think Altina was unconscious the entire time, so she wasn't able to witness it all firsthand. But her willingness, you know, that also shows you, like I said, just her growth and, you know, wanting to, you know, have those emotions, where her emotions were kind of cut from the beginning, where she's not meant to have any. Because even you know, Alberic is like, wow, I wasn't expecting her to have emotions. Like, she's grown because of the connection she was able to make. You know, where this might have started off as a mission, she grew accustomed to these friends, this life that was, you know, she kind of built for herself. And I think it's just kind of beautiful to see where that story is. And I'm obviously very excited to see kind of where it all goes, you know, in the final chapter of this with 4. Next up is Musse, and that ends up being a very interesting situation, because from the very beginning, you know something's up with Musse. Just like the way she always just seems like, even when she's talking to herself, like, now all the players lined up, it's like she knows way more. Like, you definitely feel that the first time through, but you get it, that sense, you feel it even more when you when you're going through it a second time. You're just like, what is your deal? Like, obviously you learn a little bit about her situation, but obviously at first, like, you know, when her and Rena first talking, he's like, wait, what? How do you know so much about me? But then later on you find out, it's like, oh, the reason why she knows is because she actually went to St. Estrella and then transferred to like the branch campus later on, but she was close to Alfred and Elise, so obviously she knows so much about Reen in the long run. But even then, it's like, she still knows so much more, because after the whole St. Estrella situation of her, St. Estrella, the crossbell thing, like, it's like, okay, when Class 7 is kind of in their low points, that Musse shows up and brings Ash along. Like, it's like, everything's kind of a little bit of a game to her, and that's an interesting element, because that plays into Reen's like storylines with her, in particular, like the whole his bonding events with her, because he even brings it up during the story. I think it's during while you're in I'm trying to think of that place, when you're in Ordis, that's a whole thing where it's like, you are very calculated. The fact of the matter is, you're like 1,000 moves ahead. Like, you look at this as a game. But even then, it's like, he was saying, like, all the stuff I was bringing up to Ash applies to you too. You might try to limit it, how much of effect everyone has on you, but everyone still hasn't, like, because basically, it's like, you can try to distance yourself from a lot of people. You make these jokes and stuff like that, but you're still keeping people at a little bit of an arm's distance away. But even then, even though you try to limit how much of an impact all these people are having on you, they are having an impact on you as well. Because obviously for her, it's probably all like a calculated plan, but even she, I think, got caught off guard, probably even by how close she's gotten to everyone. Because obviously we find out that she's actually a Cayenne. Like, obviously she ends up replacing the Marquis, who ends up being that douchebag who's just drinking and partying, and Raquel ends up losing the railway cannons in the whole situation. So there's that. But obviously we end up finding out, like, her, because obviously it gets hinted at, like, what's her real name. Her real name is Mildine, but it's like, obviously it's still a mystery of like why she's doing exactly what she's doing, why she's hiding who she really is, you know, for what purposes and stuff like that. Because she ends up talking about it later on. She's like, oh yeah, like, the reason why people don't remember me, because they kind of have a vague, because when you go to Heimdall later on, people are like, wait, aren't you from didn't you go to St. Estrella? Why do I feel like I know you? It's like, oh, you must be mistaken. The fact of the matter is, she talked about the fact is, like, when she was at St. Estrella, she wore a wig, which I'm wondering, because even Ash makes a remark about her fake curls, and then you're like, because when you see her later on, when she presents herself as Mildine, she has the long hair, so it's like, is that a wig? Why do you do that? I guess to kind of hide her true identity a little, but like, it's all a game to her. Like, she knows way more than she lets on. But obviously it's something that Reen ends up talking about with her later on in her bonding event. It's like prior to the final bonding event, is the fact is at school, she's like, it's like one of the last days in Trista leaves. Her bonding event is the fact is that she wants to play you in a game of was it Vagrant Masters? I'm always blank on the game's name, even though I see it all the time. But like it being a thing that when she, you know, challenges you, it's like 1 out of 3. Like if you can beat me 1 out of 3 times, I'll tell you the truth about my situation. Because Reen is interested. He knows there are complicated situations because it's like, because even Alphen and Elise talk about the fact is like there are complicated reasons why she had to leave, and I'm assuming it had to do with like, well, you are a Cayenne and like you couldn't stay there considering like what your family's connected to, because one of your family members literally started the Civil War for literally brought about the Testarossa situation and ended too. So it's like that, I'm assuming had to deal with that. Plus you learn a little bit about like her dad being dead, because obviously like Egret must be her mom's side of the family. Like her dad is the Cayenne and her mom's the Egret, so like her grandparents are her mom's parents, I believe. But so because obviously a lot of people are still in the dark about who she really is. Now Angelica knows who she really is. Patrick was kind of unaware. I think obviously Wallace knows ahead of time, because Wallace and Le Guin both know ahead of time because they've probably had conversations with her, because they actually talk about it at the end. She's predicted so much. Like she predicted that the government would make the deal with the whole Northern War situation, going to Le Guin and Wallace. So like, okay, you do this, you'll be kind of all will be forgiven about your actions during the Civil War. Like they knew ahead of time what was going to happen because she set that up. She predicted so much, even to the point they even said she predicted, because I didn't catch that the first time, but I did catch it the second time through. She was like, oh yeah, she even predicted that Le Guin would end up at the branch campus. So like she's that far ahead, like to be able to predict all that stuff. And part of me wonders, is it because her mind very similar to Claire? Because Claire has a very similar mind in the way that she does things, you know, how her mind works. Because she's able to kind of process a lot of information really quickly. So like that special ability does Musse have it to an even larger extent, considering the fact that it seems like she probably even put Claire to shame with what she's capable of. But it's like I said, I'm just curious like why the secrecy, because I guess it's like she keeps this all secret because by keeping it kind of a small circle, it's less likely this information will come out, because it's like I guess she needs pieces in this large board to play and move a certain way. So. But I also love the fact is that her entire character is her like gushing about, you know, Reen and kind of hitting on him, which he's like, no, that's inappropriate. But even he knows like that's her just messing with him a little bit. I think there is some truth to it that she did, because she even says like, oh, that you are the one, because I guess it's like the one in the sense of not necessarily like, I think she was saying that's why you're the one, because Reen was like, I am curious, but you know, you have your reasons. Until you're comfortable telling me those reasons, I won't push too much about finding out your situation. Because that was a thing too, because like Reen was comfortable, like, you know, he came out about his situation being like a commoner, but being adopted by a noble family, like obviously that being a thing in one, and obviously like he slowly but surely like got everyone else to kind of open up about their situations, you know, obviously learning about Fee's situation being a Jaeger and everything. So and like I think taking a lot of that understanding and being open with people, giving people time to talk about their situations, like he understands like whatever reasons why Musse's keeping secret, she's keeping secret for a reason. But I think even with all her plans and everything, like people know her situations like Angelica and Eustace, you know, but even then it's like even they're not in the complete know about everything. Only like Le Guin, Wallace, it turns out Vida. It's like, how did that come together? Which makes you wonder, like Vida's whole situation, she made it seem like, oh, she's always loyal to Ouroboros and the Grand Master and everything, but it's like, are your allegiances actually split somewhere else? Are you, because it seems like she's going along with Mildean's plan, so it's like probably in that time frame, like she's kind of distanced herself from the Grand Master and everything. She's making it seem like she's still loyal because this is some long game, some long con that she's playing, because it seems like her and Le Guin and Wallace are all under the same picture. Like it seems like whatever this end goal is that Musse has, they're all a part of it. They're in the know, like I said, because even Eustace isn't aware. Like he knows of her circumstances, he just doesn't know that she's actually like, I don't think he's in the know about her full-scale plan. Like I said, I think maybe she's keeping it at a very small scale. But like I said, what I was trying to say was, I'm curious, does she have plans for Reen being like, you're the one, that's why I find you so fascinating, you could be the one to change everything, that you're kind of the centerfold of not just Class 7, but kind of the centerfold of everything. Makes you wonder, did she even like did she know that she was going to end up in the same campus as Rin, and was she kind of hoping for that? Was she planning on that? Because maybe Rin, as you know, the Ashen Awakener, as the Ashen Chevalier, just being himself, he's the key to everything. Maybe not. Like, I'm so interested in finding out for like her whole deal, like what her plan has been, because it's hard to say how much stuff caught her off guard. Like, because like I said, Marina brought it up, like you can't account for everything. That's something that, you know, Musse needs to learn. And it's like, I think there are things that even she was kind of caught off guard by, because like the whole Ash thing, because she was like, wait, I feel like I missed something really important, and we're all tired. That was something she didn't calculate for. She did miss that, so that didn't go down the way she figured things might go down. Like, everything was always a worst case scenario, because she said, I have a backup plan, but hopefully that's all it stays as, is a backup plan. It doesn't become the forefront plan. Turns out whatever her backup plan is, it seems like it's in play now because of the end of the game and everything. So, but like I said, even she, but like the whole Thomas reveal, the whole Rose and Thomas thing, I wonder, was she expecting that? I don't know how much she knew ahead of time. I feel like a lot of that's a little bit out of her scope, but who knows? I mean, that'll show you just how great, I mean, it doesn't take away just how great she is calculating all this stuff anyway, figuring out all this stuff and planning so far ahead, but it makes you wonder like how much still fell in her scope the whole time. Like, she acts surprised sometimes. You kind of see the exclamation part, so it's like, I guess there's even things that maybe she wasn't aware of, you know, because I doubt, like, maybe even with Rain's situation, she probably didn't know about his ogre powers. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't, I don't know. But like I said, I still get the feeling like she probably is the only one who figured it out and probably knew ahead of time, like Rain's situation with Osborne. Either she figured it out over the course of the game, or maybe it's something she always knew. Because like I said, no one outside of Class VII and, you know, the Iron Bloods knows the truth, you know? So, like I said, I'm just curious to see kind of where her story ends up taking her going forward. And then finally, you had the whole Ash situation, which I thought that was kind of interesting what his story ended up being, because he just seems like a dick from the beginning, because it's just kind of like why he kind of has so much beef with Rain, but I guess it's just because of like, oh, look at you, Mr. Goody Two Shoes, because obviously it's like Ash is kind of a little bit of a rebel, but maybe when you look at the circumstances of his growing up, like even before we get to the Hummel situation, which I thought that was kind of an interesting reveal. Obviously, like the whole thing of like probably not really remembering his parents, and growing up with his mom, the mom he had in Raquel, she did whatever she needed to do to kind of make sure they, you know, they ate. And he, you know, it's like, yeah, she was a terrible cook, but obviously he still loved and cared about her deeply, and lost her a little while back. Because he was like super young. They were like, they even calculated, they were like, yeah, you were probably like 3 or 4 when he got adopted by his mom and Raquel. And, you know, but obviously he seems like such a hard ass, but I think it's also because like he, much like the others, and that was kind of, once again, that was the whole point, like with the whole music conversation that I brought up earlier, it's like you might try to limit how much of an effect everyone has on you, whether it be the other students in Class 7 or whether it be everyone at the branch campus. They have, you know, they are still having an effect on you, because he does open up more and more, because it's like, yeah, he seems a little harsh and scary, but even you take someone like Tatiana, like she was like, yeah, he seemed a little scary at first, but he, you know, enjoys reading, and he joined me in the literary club and everything, and it was like this beautiful thing, you know? You know, kind of her slowly realizing like, oh yeah, Ash isn't terrifying as I thought he was. Then you have characters like Gustav, and I think like Sydney, Pablo, and them, like they all kind of see, well, in particular Sydney and Gustav, because they look at him, it's like, oh yeah, like he's actually a really good guy, like he actually does a lot to help us out in the long run. So when he's no longer part of, what is it, Class 8 combat, like, and joins Class 7, like they're like, oh yeah, we'll have to kind of fill the gap, because Ash was always there kind of guiding and helping us. It's like he's a lot more, he kind of, you know, is a lot more caring than he kind of makes it seem like. He does care, you know? He does try to do the right thing. He might kind of go about it a very rash and brandish type of way, and obviously he just kind of gets annoyed by Rain, like not letting him kind of do whatever he wants to. But I think there's a lot of complexity to Ash's character. Because like I say, even he didn't expect to kind of like latch onto this group as much as he does and care about them as much as he does. You know, it's like, huh, you know, because it wasn't just, because like I said, the entirety of everyone in Class 7 is changing and being affected, whether they, you know, realize it or not. But for his story to be what it is, that it's not, because obviously there were 3 survivors in total, but obviously everyone only thinks there were 2 survivors from the Hamon situation, because we find out Love, the Blade Lord, he was one of them. We never, because the game talks about the fact that he died, but they never go into the fact as how he died, because McBurn brings it up in 2, because he's like, oh, hopefully I can find a decent challenge. I haven't been able to find one since Love went off and went off and died, you know? But it's like Love, and then obviously we know about Joshua, which I don't know the full scope of Joshua's story. I only just know the bits I picked up just from the little bit I've read about Trails in the Sky. But because obviously that was the whole thing, like, you know, when Tita's bringing it up later on, how they're not able to get into the they weren't able to get into Erebonia. Those are the two bracers that weren't able to get into Erebonia, that being Estelle and Joshua, because they wanted to come to Hamon, because obviously for Estelle it's like, this is important to Joshua, this is his home and everything, so obviously he wants to come here. And obviously and it's so interesting because, like, Ash's situation, it plays a part in his battle too, because he has that technique, his Unbound technique, where he kind of grabs his eye and then he erupts with power. Because I was thinking it was much like Kurt's Blade Dance, like there wouldn't be any significance of it, but it's like, no, it seems like that might be connected to that that power of his. I mean, what ends up happening to him later on, that whole being cursed thing, because obviously it's been inside of him for the past 14 years, ever since the Hamon situation, like that curse passed to him. And even his story gets even more, you know, complicated, because it's like, obviously he was an insider for Scarecrow. Scarecrow had him be like a spy. That's why he was keeping an eye. That's why he was more so keeping an eye on Ring, because it was more so because Scarecrow wanted him to get the lowdown on everything that's going down and kind of report back. But it was also because I think for him, he was only doing all this because he wanted certain information himself, because I think he wanted to probably find out more about the Hamon situation. And obviously he ends up finding out from Scarecrow, because Scarecrow opens up about it, where it's like, Scarecrow, you know, Lecter's dad was one of the nobles that led the charge with the whole Hamon situation, and it's like, because of you, my life has turned into what it is. So it's like, for him, he's like, I could get my revenge, but honestly, I haven't decided what I'm gonna do yet, so I'm just gonna let this go. Knowing is enough for now. But I think that's also proof of how much Ash has grown, because Ash before him probably would have jumped on the opportunity, but because of everything, he's like, no, I'm gonna take my time, because it's like, who's responsible? Should I be angry at Scarecrow? Should I be mad at his dad? Should I be mad at you? And obviously the curse inside of him is worsening and worsening at the very end, you know, when he ends up shooting, you know, the Emperor and everything, and just like, you know, sadly Ash being a pawn in all of this. Because we see, the last time you see Ash is when they're carrying him off to, you know, Gwen and Wallace, and that's the last time we see him. So I'm assuming he's on the Pantagruel with them at the very end. So I guess this might have even been part of their plan. But their deal is to kind of get away while shit's happening in the Empire. Yeah. And so I guess they're supposed to stay high above, because by being on an airship, they won't be affected by the initial miasma. I guess eventually it will wear, either they'll have to stay in the sky until it completely wears off, so they won't be affected. But they also brought Ash as well, so they can keep an eye on him, I'm assuming. So, because like I've talked about it before, the only thing I've seen of Trails of Cold Steel 4 was a gameplay trailer, which shows you, like, spoilers, new Class 7 rescuing Ring from his circumstances at the end. And after that, the only other thing I saw was like basically heroes from the other games, from the Crossbow games, from In the Sky, because you see like Joshua and Estelle. You also see Lloyd, and I think Tio, for example. So you see people from the other games kind of coming together, because this is no longer just an Erebonia thing. Like, every country's going to have to come together for this. All these other heroes from you know, these 9 games are going to have to come together for this situation. So I think that's just kind of that's all I've seen of it. But the fact is, I saw it like twice, but it's been a while. But I believe Ash was with them, so they must reunite at some point in time. It's probably going to do the same thing, like from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, where it's like that's that time skip. You're just not going. You'll probably be filled in later on, but you won't see it. So, for example, you know, you probably won't find out how they eventually met up with Ash. Maybe you won't get the ins and outs about everything that went down, but still. I'm interested to see kind of where Ash's story goes. I mean, especially with this Hamon situation, like what that means for him later on. Because part of me wonders, because as you see, like, because there's a screenshot I saw of Randy not wearing the same clothes. So some of the characters are wearing different clothes. It seems like old Class 7 are still wearing the same clothes they have in 3. but like everyone from new Class 7 is wearing new clothes. So part of me wonders, are they kind of in a similar situation as everyone from Thor's Academy and 2, where they were kind of wanted, so they couldn't be walking around in their school uniform? So it makes me wonder, or is that just them keeping a low cover because it's easy? I'm curious, because part of me wonders, as the branch campus, I'm going ahead and throw this out there. I wonder, did Reem get blamed for what went down? Like, did they go like, oh, our Action Chevalier isn't the hero we thought he was, and so they kind of paint him as the bad guy, so everyone else kind of gets painted as a bad guy, especially considering Ash is the one who shot the Emperor, so it's looking like, oh, the branch campus in general is kind of getting the brunt of it. It seems like, you know, regardless of all that, I just think that's such a, you know, currently where my head is. Once again, haven't read or seen anything, so those were just kind of my thoughts on it. But yeah, I decided to end this portion of the recording session, you know, this part of the discussion. Obviously, I will continue on into the next part of this discussion, but till then, till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.